You've just listened to him explain why black beans and chickpeas should not be right next to each other on the shelf, despite, I don't know, the alphabet, and why circular motions are not the go-to move when you're buffing your car. And now he's walking you through his bidet settings like this is his TED Talk. And I see you. You're sitting there like, okay, but is this chemistry? I mean, am I feeling electricity? Did I miss it? Was that it? Are there supposed to be violins right now or quiet? And that is how most of us date. We're waiting for something to hit, for it to feel really, really obvious. And if it doesn't, we're out. He's nice, but I'm not feeling it. But then you look at Gen Z, and they're out here making the rest of us look like we've been hallucinating for 2 decades. They aren't looking for a lightning strike. They're looking for a comfortable place to sit. While we're vibrating with spark anxiety, they're treating a first date like a low-stakes subscription trial. They aren't auditioning a soulmate. They're just checking to see if the person's presence is more annoying than being alone. They've traded the theatrical fire alarm for the slow burn. They're taking their time, lowering the temperature, and actually figuring out if they like a person's personality before they decide if they're going to let them see the inside of their apartment. They've realized that the lightning strike is usually just a red flag in a very expensive suit, and they're, I don't know, maybe too tired for the drama. In fact, they figured out a lot of stuff that older grown-ups are struggling with in the dating process right now. So I thought I'd cue you into what I'm seeing with my younger folks. That sounds at all interesting or intriguing? I hope you'll stick around because that's what's on the agenda.
Here's some real advice for your dating life. Coffee with Carey. Coffee with Carey.
Somewhere along the way, we got sold this idea that love has to announce itself like a movie scene. Instant recognition, immediate certainty. The whole body goes yes, no in the first 15 minutes. And if it doesn't happen, well, then we assume it's all wrong. We assume maybe we missed it, or like we blinked at the wrong moment and the magic slipped right past us while we were deciding whether or not we wanted to order calamari. But here's the thing nobody really says out loud. Spark isn't really a reliable measuring tool. Sometimes it's attraction, yeah. Sometimes it's novelty. Sometimes it's just anxiety. You know, that feeling where you genuinely can't tell if you're falling in love or getting ready to give a presentation to 300 people. Yeah, we've been calling that feeling chemistry for decades and making major life decisions based on it. We've planned entire futures around a feeling that is, medically speaking, indistinguishable from mild panic. Here's what I've learned from watching hundreds of people date. The ones who felt the most intense, immediate spark, not always the ones who ended up happiest. Not even close. I've watched people feel absolutely nothing on a first date and end up completely in love and devoted to each other 2 years later. And I've watched people feel like they got struck by lightning on date 1 and be absolutely miserable by date 6. The spark is not the story. It's just the opening credits. And Gen Z seems a little less committed to treating that feeling like gospel. Not because they've figured out love. I mean, nobody's figured out love, let's be honest. But because they've seen enough chaos to stop trusting fireworks as a long-term strategy. What you notice with younger daters is this willingness to let things develop without forcing a verdict on night 1. Not indifference, just patience with ambiguity, which if you've been dating for any length of time, you know is basically a superpower that nobody is born with, and most of us spend years accidentally destroying in ourselves. A first date doesn't have to reveal your future. It just has to answer a very small question. Do you know the question? Do I want to see this person one more time? Right? That's it. That changes the whole temperature of dating because suddenly you're not grading somebody's soul after a walk with a cup of coffee. You're just collecting information like a normal person who totally understands that humans take more than 90 minutes to unfold. Many of us take years to unfold. Some of us are still unfolding. We'll get into that at some other point. I mean, just think about every person that you've really loved in your life. Somebody who became completely essential to you. Why on very random occasions, like doing a second rinse in the shower or, I don't know, pan-searing tofu, do I suddenly remember the mnemonic device I was taught in 1971? Roy G. Biv. That guy just pops into my head out of nowhere. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. The prism in order. I didn't mean to memorize it forever. I just never forget. So here we are. A mnemonic device is just a shortcut to help you remember things. BYOM, that's not a mnemonic device. But those 4 letters might just trigger you to remember everything you learned in my master class. All the specific steps that lead you to fantastic dates, to people who invite you to be yourself, and to finding your person. In the same way I see a rainbow and I think, Roy G. Biv. When you see a potential match, maybe you could think BYOM and allow that to remind you that you're no longer just winging it. You have a framework to guide you through every move. Engage with this person, get to know them, find out if they're the one. The link to my class is in the description box below. And now we can get back to the episode. Did you know on day 1? Probably not. It built, it accumulated. You kept showing up and you kept choosing each other. And then one day you looked up and realized this person was woven into the fabric of your life and you couldn't imagine them not being there. That's how it actually works. And Gen Z, whether they know it consciously or not, seems to be operating from that understanding. And yes, real relationships that last tend to look more like that than like instant certainty. Not fireworks, familiarity, gradual trust. The slow realization that you actually like how someone exists in your life. Less of, I knew immediately, and more, I just keep choosing this person, which is not as cinematic, I get it, but it's significantly more useful if you plan on staying together for a while. It's not really about a generation being wise or evolved or anything that neat. It's more like people are tired of over-investing in first impressions that don't hold up, tired of building entire emotional theories off a single evening and a shared appetizer. That is a tremendous amount of pressure to put on a basket of bread, So instead, some people are just slowing down the judgment, not lowering standards. That's not a different thing altogether. Just delaying conclusions, which honestly is probably the part most of us skipped for years. We were too busy deciding if somebody was our person, we forgot to notice if we actually liked them. I don't know, how did they get so smart about this? I'm not working with everybody, so they're getting to this on their own. But I do have a theory. I think that some of the younger daters watched the generation before them, us, treat dating like a high-stakes audition where you either got the part in the first 5 minutes or you were escorted out of the building. They watched that not work over and over again, and they quietly decided to try something different. Because the evidence was right there in front of them. And the evidence said slowing down might work a little bit better. Being curious probably works better. Letting something breathe before you decide would be good. So if Gen Z isn't trying to suss out their soulmate on the first date, what are they looking for? What's the vibe check? It's pretty simple, actually. They're looking for comfort, for a sense that they can be themselves around this person. No performing or posturing required. They want to know if they actually enjoy hanging out with this human, if they have things in common, if they have a baseline of respect and kindness. They're not walking in with a clipboard. They're not mentally scoring each answer like a gymnastics judge holding up 7.4 for the story about the camping trip. They're not analyzing every micro expression for signs of eternal love. They're just asking themselves, do I like hanging out with this person? Do I feel good in their presence? Because there is a very specific kind of exhaustion that comes from a first date where you are working hard the entire time. Like your own PR person, You get home and you need to lie down because apparently you just ran a half marathon without noticing. It's a refreshingly low-pressure approach. It takes the weight off of every interaction, every text message. It allows for a natural progression from, hey, this is fun, to, I really like spending time with you, to I can't imagine my life without you in it. 3 sentences that could take anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 years, and that's completely fine because you're not on a game show and nobody's holding a rose waiting to see if you feel it fast enough. Dating not as a high stakes audition, but a casual vibe check. Wow, Gen Z might be onto something here. Actually, they're definitely onto something. The rest of us are just too stubborn to admit we've been doing it wrong. Deafening roar of engines on the tarmac, and this person is glimmering in that haze of jet fuel. That's kind of what love at first sight feels like. And if that hits you like that, amazing. Just go ahead and enjoy it. But Gen Z, bit more environmentally conscious. They know what that jet fuel is doing to the ozone layer, and frankly, they're not in a rush to ignite some invisible spark. They figured out what some of us take a lifetime to learn. Love doesn't always announce itself with a big roar. Sometimes it takes its sweet time, and that's the whole point, isn't it? That's the wisdom we're here to celebrate. Of course, there are a million speeds between jet plane and horse-drawn carriage. Some people fall in love like they're on a jet ski, that smile so wide that their cheeks hurt, because it's physically impossible to frown on a jet ski. Others like they're sharing an Uber pool, dreading that awkward small talk with a stranger. But the point is, love's got options. So while some of us are still waiting for that movie moment, Gen Z's out here normalizing the scenic route. They're showing us that slow and steady really does win the race, at least when it comes to finding your person. And honestly, I think we could all stand to take a page from their playbook, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how quickly you get to love, as long as you get there. Something subtle is happening with pacing, and Gen Z is leading the charge on this one. Instead of one and done, there's more willingness to revisit, not out of obligation, but because one interaction, one date, isn't enough data anymore. Which, when you think about it, is just good science. You wouldn't taste one bite of something and declare yourself a food critic. You wouldn't hear one song and say you know everything about that band. You'd give it another listen or try another bite. Dating is the one area of life where we decide one data point was enough and then wonder why our results are so wildly inconsistent or skewed. People are giving space for nerves to settle, which matters so much because a lot of first date behavior is just anxiety. People don't always show up wrong. They show up tight, and tight doesn't reveal much at all that's real. The person who talked too much about their job on date 1, nervous. The one who laughed at everything you said, even when it wasn't funny, nervous. The person who ordered the most expensive thing on the menu and then seemed surprised when the check came, okay, that one might be who they are. But the point still stands. So instead of discarding somebody immediately, there's a bit more. Let's see what they're like when they're not actively trying to survive this. And sometimes that second or third interaction is completely different. And that person you almost wrote off after one glass of wine turns out to be the most interesting human you've met in years. That really does happen. I've seen it happen more times than I can even count. I had a client who went on a first date, came back and said, she was fine, but I really didn't feel anything. Like, I haven't heard that before. I said, go again. And he went again. Third date, he said, I don't know what happened, but I can't stop thinking about her. And they've been together for 4 years now because he went on a second date instead of chasing the feeling he thought he was supposed to have on the first date. One extra date, that's really all it took. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how quickly something starts. What matters is whether it becomes something that you can actually live inside of. Not just feel intensely for a moment, but exist in without losing yourself. Without white-knuckling every interaction, hoping that the feeling comes back. I mean, the goal was never the spark. The goal was the thing that still makes sense after the spark stops being interesting. The thing that shows up on a random Wednesday when nothing in particular is exciting or, going on. That's a big deal. You just want to be in the same room as this person. And that part takes longer to reveal itself. Nobody puts that on a dating profile. But, maybe they should. I think we should all swipe right on somebody who says, still makes sense on a random Wednesday. I might swipe so fast on that I'd sprain something. Gen Z seems to understand this in a way that took the rest of us a decade to figure out, if we figured it out at all. They're not waiting for the grand romantic gestures. They're not holding out for the movie moments. They're asking quieter questions and getting way better answers. And the rest of us could stand to learn something from that. Stop waiting for the lightning strike when what you actually want is somebody who keeps the lights on. So the next time you're sitting across from someone and you're wondering whether you should be feeling more than you are, you don't necessarily need to solve it in real time. You can just notice it. Do I like being here? Do I like me here? Maybe you don't decide everything on night one. Maybe you just leave a little space for the person to actually show up as themselves. Not the nervous version, just them, on another date. And see what happens after that. That's what these younger folks seem to be figuring out. And honestly, they are on the right track. All right, well, I hope you found that interesting. If you did, you might want to check out this episode here. But hey, before you go, could you please give my mother, yeah, that's my little mama there, give her the thumbs up that she's asking for. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Helps the channel a lot. I look forward to seeing you back here again soon. And until next time, have a good one.